Well, good day, Grand Lakers. Welcome to the Grand Lake SportsCenter Rodcast. I'm Sam Williams, and it is truly a privilege to bring this to you. The Rodcast is about legacy, community, and the people who built this lake. So, the lake level lowdown. Here's your lake level lowdown. This is Tuesday, March 24th. The lake level is at 742. The surface temperature is approximately 57 to 59 degrees, with some reports of 68 to 70 degree water. Water clarity reports indicate the water is generally stained to murky in many areas, mostly near river channels and inflows. The wind is south-southeast at 5 to 10 miles an hour. So boaters and anglers, please plan accordingly and stay safe. What's biting on Grand? So the largemouth bass fishing is currently excellent, particularly with the spring pre-spawn. Anglers are having success with active shallow water patterns using jerk baits and jigs. The red and orange colors are on fire. They are being caught around docks and rocky points as the water warms. Crappie fishing is fair. We need the water at 64 degrees to get the spawn started. They are transitioning from the deep water patterns towards shallow water with success using minnows, jigs around brush piles, and 8 to 12 feet of water has been being reported to us through our fishermen. Catfishing is currently successful in 25 to 30 feet, but also shallower, using cut shad. We sell beef liver and beef heart, which has been very productive also. Fish the drop-offs in the channel areas. White bass fishing is productive in 5 to 10 feet, with anglers catching them on swim baits, spinner baits, and jigs. And the blade baits are really popular right now. So fishing below the dam is during generation is excellent. We're getting very many reports of very big hybrids being caught during this process. So the tournament trail, there were 2 tournaments this past weekend. The Ozark Mountain Team Trail, which had Jacob and Cade, who won with 22.21 pounds, taking home a Nitro Z18 boat worth $43,000. Sunday was the Extreme Fishing League, and Richard and Landon won with 24.62 pounds and took home a check for $15,000. Congratulations, guys. That was excellent. As this broadcast continues, I want you to meet a good friend of mine, Leroy Harding. He ran the water sports department at the Sports Center for almost 30 years. Leroy is going to tell us how his father prepared the land for the Pensacola Dam in the Grand Lake over the Cherokees. I'm going to turn this over to Leroy and enjoy this special story.
Well, Sam, one of the things that I don't think you can really imagine is a gravel road from Tahlequah to Joplin. Now, was it gravel further than that? I don't know. It's as further as I've ever been in those days, but it's hard to imagine. But the clearing of the Grand Lake, well, it started in about 38. They started clearing the timber out of the lake, and guess what that was? Right in the middle of the Depression. We needed jobs desperately here. The only job, and then to make matters even worse, we had a 7-year drought. Now, it wasn't a 7-year dry period, it was a 7-year drought. You could raise nothing. My people all came from south of Honey Creek Bridge in the hill country, and we could raise nothing. There was no jobs. If you could find a job, it paid 50 cents a day. And then a wonderful thing happened. We're going to get a lake. Now, the river uh, bottom farmers, some wonderful farms in river bottoms, they weren't very happy because they was losing some very good farms. And the prairie farmers, they didn't really care because they wasn't involved anyway, so let's just go fishing. Now, the hill country south of here, it was wonderful because we had people that wanted jobs. If you could get a job, it was 50 cents a day. And there just wasn't any job. You can't imagine, Sam, trying to make money where no one has any money. And so my dad, uh, the only way you could make a dollar, first of all, you probably didn't know it. We had a railroad at that time, a spur off of Southwest City. And it's down right behind us here, about a block. And there was a turnaround or a roundabout on it. They would run the train in, they would put the engine of the train on this, and they would actually, two people turn an engine around and it would push it back to Southwest City. So, and they would buy ties for railroads. They had money. Railroads had money. And so all the guys south of Honey Creek Bridge in the timber area, and there was probably 100,000 acres back of it then, they were tie hackers. They made ties for the railroad. And if you came to town, which took all day in a wagon to bring your ties down, probably took all day to make a tie, you had to fell the tree. And then when you take it to town, they would pay you $1 for it. If there wasn't too many ties. If there was a bunch of ties that day, they paid you 75 cents. The inhumanity to man has been going on a long time and probably still is. I'm just not involved in any way with it. The Roy was he bought a farm. He bought a farm in 1927, and his payment on it was $80 a year. That's 23 cents a day. And he had to give the farm up. The man wouldn't take it back because the federal land base. What are we going to do with it if you can't pay 23 cents a day? But they was going to take the farm back, 23 cents a day. And now I see people drinking $6 coffee. I almost choke when I see that. But anyway, Roy had two things going for him. He was a good friend of the banker across the street here, and he owed him money, quite a bit of money. So they came in to to clear the lake, and there was two men that had the contract. There was I'm going to have a hard time with people. There was a fella Flemings and another fella from it doesn't make any difference, from downstate. So they set up their offices at the Grand Lake Bank, and they used the Grand Lake Bank's money for in and out of clearing the lake, making payrolls and so on and so forth. Well, Roy was a good friend of the banker, and so Roy went into the bank, and the banker thought, "Oh boy, I might get Roy to pay me if I got him a job." So he got him a foreman's job. Now Roy didn't know anything about timber, but he knew every tie hacker in the hill country. And they did nothing but timber all their lives. They were so good at what they did. So he got Roy a job as a foreman, and Roy looked up all his old friends, the tie hackers, and hired them. They were trying to make $1 a day, and they were paying them 45 cents an hour, and you could work 10 hours. You make $4.50 a day on the lake. What a job it was. They paid Roy 65 cents. But Roy said he liked to never got home with any money because everyone he knew was there when he got paid, so he had to pay them. But finally he did, and they started clearing the lake basin. Now all they had was mules and horses and chains and crosscut saws. If you don't know what a crosscut saw is, it's a 6-foot saw with a handle on both sides, and you operate it on your knees. You push and pull. There's not 3 men in town today that could do that job for 8 hours. And these guys were doing it 10 hours, 6 days a week. Roy said that, let me catch up here. Roy said there was some sycamore trees along the riverbank that it would take 2 men all day to cut one tree. They were so massive on that riverbank. Of course, this was permanent growth, first growth. Had never been cut with anything. Roy was paid 65 cents an hour. There was no power equipment. Now, before they got this dam cleared, they were starting to come out with chainsaws, but they weren't made for industry. They were made to cut a tree down. There's a difference between cutting a tree down with a chainsaw and cutting it for 10 hours with one. No power equipment, all done by hand. Small trees were cut by axes. They brought the horses in. They brought the chains in. They drug the timber to a place it had to be burned. They hadn't learned yet how wonderful it was to leave the timber standing in the lake for the production of fish protection. But that was the way it was, and the only way that it was. From a kneeling position, sycamores by the river. Let me find my notes. There's going to be a
That's
lake.
pretty impressive.
Go ahead, Sam.
That they made that kind of money that time during, and that was a good job back then.
Oh, let's imagine Sam making $1,000 a day today. Probably would have been $450 back then. You know, it's unbelievable.
That's pretty impressive.
It was, but you had to have men that could do it in physical conditions, that had worked in the timber all their lives. Now, in 1939 was one of the coldest winters that Grove ever had, or Northeast Oklahoma ever had, and crossing the river, it froze the river solid.
Wow.
And, yeah, and these guys was getting off work, and they'd have to walk across the rivers, and guess what they saw in the water?
What?
The fish. The fish was frozen solid in the ice.
Wow.
So it was big fish. They were carp, they were buffalo, and they would just take their axes, their saws, and they'd cut out a chunk of ice. Now, I wasn't here when this happened, but my sister was. Roy brought home a big chunk of ice with a big fish in it, and he put a number 2 wash tub behind the stove, the wood stove, and in the night the fish thawed out, and my sister said it was just splashing and having an enormous big time, and behind the stove there. So that was Joe's first takeout fish.
Yeah, I've heard of. There's a lot of fish that you can freeze them, and when they thaw, they swim off.
Well, as I said, Roy found out that he couldn't hardly ever get home with any money, but finally he got everyone paid, and he had a paycheck coming in. His was $6.50 a day. Now imagine that for a week, or working for 50 cents an hour. So he had a paycheck, and then when Roy had been younger in his life, he had went to Idaho as he had got the 1918 flu and almost died. And he went to Idaho and get his health back with an aunt, and he went to a fortune teller. And Roy was wondering, will I ever get a good job? I said, yes, you will. Well, what is it? She said, I can't tell you, but I see big green things falling all around. And Roy always thought that that's what she told him. And he said, well, I'll be able to hold the job. And she said, longer than you wanted. So that's where they was. He always thought this was what she was talking about. And Roy went ahead to clear several lake basins, Texoma, Uchi, Woodward, Copan. I think he worked for 11 years, and he was clearing. He's either foreman or superintendent, clearing lake basins. The last job that he did was Upper Spavinaw, and at that time this was 1950, and he was paid $100 a week plus truck, gas, oil, which was still a good job.
Wow, yeah.
Was back in 1950. This was a lot of money. When he finished the job, the contractor, well, I'm going ahead of my story. And guess what happened with Roy's crew? There was 2 crews clearing this lake, one at the dam and one at Roy here at Grove. And guess what happened to Roy's crew?
What?
They was cutting twice as much timber as the others. because they knew how to do timber. They never did anything but timber. So made Roy look like the fair-haired boy.
I guess it's
Yeah, they couldn't wait to take him and out for hire at either the following lakes. It wasn't Roy's skill; it was the skill of the hackers. But when they went to Texoma, Roy was smart enough. He took several hackers with him, and by then he could give them good jobs, and they would teach his crew how to cut timber. So the last time that Roy, like I said, was Upper Spavinaw Lake, and the guy tried to get him to go to Iowa. They was building, cutting timber on a lake up there, but Roy said that he would never deal with the public again. This was 1951. By this time, things had prospered. We had land that we could run 100 cows on, and things had prospered. And Roy was just tired of dealing with the public. He says, I'm going to go home and sit on my front porch and raise cattle and rock for the rest of my life. And he did for 51 years.
Well, he died.
He died in 1999.
So he sent a lot of those people that he had pulled out of the country. They went off and taught other people how to lumber.
That's exactly what he took them for, to teach the rest of his crews how to cut.
So that just expanded all that manpower.
Oh, I imagine his production would have been twice what the other end of the lake was, just because of the talent that he had. And Roy was one of these very jovial guys. Everyone was his friend, and kind of like Sam. He's just a jovial guy. And
so at the base of the dam, I mean, how was that before and after? I mean, do you remember?
Well, I didn't go down there very much. The only time that they had a picnic to celebrate the dam opening, and I was there that day. But the dam was supposed to, this lake was supposed to take 3 years to fill up. It took 90 days. They had trouble.
90 days.
They had trouble getting some of the equipment out down towards the dam where they had heavy equipment. They had lots of floods up in the Kansas watershed, and this thing blew full before they.
What was at the base of the dam? Was it a lot of lumber? Was it a lot of rock? How was it when they went to clear that? Do you remember?
Sam, I wasn't at that end of it. I just really don't know. I'm sure it was just like the rest of it was, just good old Oklahoma rock and stuff. But that's about all I can tell you.
That's
about telling you about the lake. Roy did. None of the people south of Honey Creek Bridge had a car back then, so Roy had an old Chevrolet car, and he cut the back half off of it and put a bed on it. Now, I know this is hard to imagine.
Now that's a redneck truck, right?
Prosperity. And not only that, these tie hackers had no way to get there, so he built benches clear around, and he took the tie hackers to work and took them home.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I'm sure they appreciated that.
Not only that, you knew they showed up because
you went and got them.
You went and got them. Absolutely.
So that's absolutely amazing. So it's hard to imagine that people today would have a hard time even imagining how hard it was working back then.
Well,
they didn't know any other way.
You didn't know any other way.
Yeah, that's all you knew. It's hard work.
And they lived in tie hacker shacks.
And you were glad to have the work.
Oh my goodness, Sam! You didn't eat. We didn't have welfare. You didn't eat if you didn't work.
Right.
There wasn't any place. You might go to your neighbor's house and steal a chicken, but pretty soon he'd stop you.
Yeah, I'm sure that would happen.
And I'll tell you how bad it was, how bad the drought was out there, that the guys making their moonshine, there was always an old logging truck or two in the neighborhood, in the area. So they'd wait till the dark of the moon, and they'd load on this old truck, and they'd go down somewhere around Mud City. That would be on the river below Xena, Dennis, down in that area. And they could still grow some corn in that river bottom in that drought. So they'd go to the Dark of the Moon and they'd steal enough corn to make their whiskey.
Well, I'll be darned.
Try it out. Just poverty. I couldn't start to tell you
I guess
how
even
the poverty was.
back then when you worked that hard, I guess that was one way for them to vent.
Oh,
You know,
they didn't have to go to a doctor to get something to sleep.
I guess
know,
so.
You slept well. You didn't have to go to the doctor much anyway because you were in physical condition. Mostly what they ate was pork,
Okay.
and pork and whatever you could raise. And they were self-sufficient. They needed to sell enough eggs or cream or something like that to get a little bit of coffee and a little bit of sugar. But mostly we used molasses. Someone on the area made molasses, and then you would swap a chicken or a slab of pork or something for a gallon of molasses. And,
so a lot of bartering went on back then.
If you didn't have any money, there wasn't anything else.
That's all you had. Yeah.
There wasn't any money, right?
Well, that's just super interesting. I mean, I hope everybody learned a whole lot from this. I think to see what Leroy saw back in the days. I mean, it's hard to imagine us today living like that, and we all take advantage of what we have today, and we're so lucky and fortunate, to have what we have, and to live in the United States of America. So you have anything else that you'd like to say?
Oh, let's see, Sam. Did you know that there was a Grand Lake ferry?
I've heard about the ferry. Was that at Honey Creek?
Yeah, it was where Honey Creek Bridge is now, and it was just a wonderful thing to ride the ferry. It was made. It had barrels on the bottom of it, kind of like the old fishing docks, and had probably you could put 6 cars on it. It was pretty long, and it ran with a cable across the lake. Well, as a kid, you just couldn't imagine anything more fun than going across the ferry. The biggest thing we'd ever seen was Whitewater Creek,
What propelled it?
They had a motorized winch and on the cable, and they would pull it across, and then it would reverse it.
I'll be darned.
You can still see where on the other side of Honey Creek Bridge where the ferries, you go down and get onto the ferry, and it would hold 6 cars. Usually was pretty full, and what an adventure for kids. I was 5 years old, I believe, at this time, and it would bounce up and it would bounce down, and it was just like, what an experience.
That was the only way to get across, right?
Either that or you had to go to Barry's Ford. And this was there was a ford up on Honey Creek that you could cross on, but there was a problem up there because there's a man that had a perpetual mud hole. And he had 2 horses, and he kept these horses harnessed with chains. So you brought it ahead of the story.
Yeah.
When we went across, you got stuck. He hauled you out for whatever you could get, and so people didn't want to pay. They wanted to go across on the ferry.
All right.
It was free, and on this ferry, these men had 4 cane fishing poles, one on each corner. It was my dream to grow up and work on the ferry. They would catch their fish to supper and take home with them and fish
while they were working.
Oh, while they were working, you bet. Well, they put first things first, and the first thing was, let's have supper. And let me see if I got something else. One day I remember that Roy and I were on the ferry, and the cable broke. Blew the thing. It was on a windstorm, and blew us way up the lake. And they had boats come up and pulled it back down when it just went up to a mud bank and pulled it back down, and they hooked it back up. And
there was cars on it and people.
There was, yeah. Roy and I was on it. But there again, what an adventure!
I bet so.
This was the high seas. This was pirates. And it was every boy's ambition to work on the ferry. Of course, when I got home, I was 5 years old, and I could not wait to go down to the barn, and we had high-built cattle troughs, about this high. You fed cattle in. So I could get in the trough, and it was my boat, and I could sail the high seas, and I could fight the pirates.
There you go.
I always got home in time for Mom's great supper.
There you go.
That's my story, Sam.
All right, that's awesome. That's just awesome. Well, I hope everybody got to enjoy some of the history that we're trying to reproduce and share with everybody on how this area was created. And we just want you to enjoy the Rodcast that the Grand Lake SportsCenter puts out. So remember, we are your lake information headquarters. Today, the Grand Lake SportsCenter is now providing what you need for the lake. We do fishing tackle, water sports, marine accessories, shooting sports. We have gifts and apparel. We offer free maps and local referrals for lodging, restaurants, and attractions. So if there's any kind of information that we can give out that people need, please call. We're more than happy to share this with you. So just remember that Grand Lake is more than just water. It's memories and family time. This is Sam Williams. Thank you for watching and listening to the Grand Lake SportsCenter Rodcast. I'm a local who loves my community and supports it with all my heart. Let's have fun, let's learn together, and let's celebrate Grand Lake. Fish on.